newly appointed Israeli ambassador to South Africa. Interestingly, who is also formerly the Israeli ambassador to Ukraine. And we thought with everything happening around the globe, it would be a great opportunity to interview him and to hear his perspective on current events. Here's the interview, and we hope you enjoy it.
Well, hello everybody who's watching. We are really excited about this opportunity we have today. I'm going to be interviewing the Israeli ambassador to South Africa. And so I'm going to say, welcome, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, his full name is Eliav Balot Surkovsky. And it really is a privilege for you to be in our city. And as I've said to you, I think our priority this morning or today is to welcome you generously and graciously. And I think for us, it's very important that I know you've been busy today, but we've got you in the middle of the day, and really that you step into the city without any reservations and know that there are people in the community that are excited to have you and are eager to build relationship with Israel and the Jewish people. And so welcome, welcome, welcome. We know that our city historically hasn't performed at its best and most gracious in receiving Israeli representation, but also haven't been gracious to Jewish people. And so as a church, I want you to know that we've taken as many steps as we can to reverse that and to make sure that this is a place of warmth and a place of hospitality, and we hope that you experience that as you meet us. I also want to say that we also obviously are a faith-based organization. We're a church. We're Christian, as you know. But we also believe and are convicted in the belief that the roots of our faith are embedded in the Jewish faith, and our scriptures tell us that very thing. And so our relationship is important to us. It goes beyond politics or national alignments. It really is something that sits in the depth of our heart. And the relationship with Israel and the Jewish people is deeply significant. And so it really is with a warm and sincere heart that we welcome you to Durban. And we welcome you on behalf of a community of Christians in the city, not just as one church. And so welcome, welcome, welcome. We're very excited. And yes, we have a small in-house group here. But I also want to say congratulations on the accreditation that you received from Cyril Ramaphosa. That must have been a pleasant experience to have as you came into South Africa. Yeah, so let's get on with it.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much, really, for inviting me and for providing me this opportunity to speak to the people of the church and probably beyond as well. I have to say that I'm here with my wife, Elena, and we really, really feel among friends. And the moment we stepped in, we felt the warmth and the hospitality, so we really feel great. You know, we've been in South Africa for slightly more than 4 months now, so we are still pretty much on a learning curve. But we were very impressed by the friendship that we meet everywhere, basically, in South Africa. There are also, you know, different situations, obviously, but in general, I would say that really we are very impressed by the friendship. Wonderful. And I've been in many countries throughout my career, but really the warmth we feel here is really amazing. So thank you very much for that.
I think it's true in many places that the politics of a place and the personality of a place can be very different. And I think the hospitality of South Africans in general is generous and unique. And so we're glad that you're receiving and experiencing some of that. Can I ask you to start with just maybe a general personal introduction? And could you give us some insights as to where you're from originally, a little bit of your history?
Well, sure. Basically, I was born in a country that does not exist anymore. It was called USSR. When I was born, it was still that country. Now it's called Republic of Moldova. And it's very close to Ukraine, which is tragically very much in the news last days. And my family emigrated to Israel when I was 9 years old, so I was still a kid. And I grew up basically in Israel, and I went through the usual cycle of Israeli child, kid, young person, first school, then army. I was 4 years in the Israeli army. Then I went to travel abroad a little bit with like a backpacker. And then I joined the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I studied Chinese and international relations. Then I did master's in business. And then I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That was a fulfillment of my dream, basically, to be a diplomat and to represent Israel. And I was lucky enough to be able to fulfill it. That's really a hand of fate, probably, there. And since then, I've been working in different countries. I started in Singapore. Then I worked in Cyprus, in India, and the last position abroad was ambassador to Ukraine in Kiev. Yeah, so as you can imagine, both me and Elena, we feel very, very close to what's happening there. We have many friends there. Some are unfortunately now in Kiev in cellars, hoping for the best, and it's a very, very tough, emotionally, very tough experience, definitely.
Sure, and I'm sorry. Obviously, as you say, you have friends there, and so it just makes what we're seeing that much more personal and close to your heart. We've alluded to it, but I would understand that South Africa is not the simplest post when it comes to ambassadorship, particularly for an Israeli ambassador. When you received the post or got word of the post, would your colleagues have seen this as a step that you want to jump towards, or a step that you would want to avoid?
Well, that's a good question, but I would say that first I have to say that it was not easy at all to get this position, although I'm already relatively senior in the ministry, but there was a tough competition. So I was very happy, extremely happy when I managed to get this position. Also because I think it's a challenging position, and I prefer challenges. I think it spices life a bit, particularly boring life of a diplomat, you know. So I was really very happy to receive it, and also in Israel, everybody knows again about the beautiful country of South Africa, you know, of the very, very friendly people and so on. So I must say we had no doubts about coming here, and we are very, very happy to be here. Absolutely.
Mr. Ambassador, as an ambassador, do you come with a message? Do you come with a relational mandate? And what are the ambitions of Israel in South Africa and with South Africa? Where would Israel like to see our relationship? So there's the message, what's the mandate, and then where does the relationship to go to?
Yes. Well, as in any position like that, I think the main issue is really to see how we can strengthen the relations between Israel and South Africa. And I believe there is a lot of potential, really a lot of potential in almost any field we can think of. But I think particularly I would be very interested to leave an impact on the lives of the ordinary South Africans, because Israel can be very relevant to the life of the people here. We already have some projects in Limpopo area of connecting with Israeli technology villages to running water. So it's a big project. So far, more than 300,000 people were connected to running water in that area in the villages. We have some projects of at schools creating gardens, vegetable gardens, using again Israeli seeds and Israeli irrigation system, teaching students to grow vegetables, to be self-sufficient in food, and therefore strengthening food security. So there are a number of projects. I've been talking with the Ministry of Agriculture of Western Cape Province to establish some kind of a center of excellence in agriculture with Israeli technology. We hope to do something also in KwaZulu-Natal as well in that regard. And I think we can work and do a lot in order really to share Israeli experience, to share, because we also were very poor at the beginning. We had a lot of difficulties, we still do in many ways, but we managed to reach a very high level. And when I see the people here, I see their talent and their commitment and their patriotism, and I don't see why on earth South Africa cannot become another major source of talents, of development, of innovation, of entrepreneurship, etc. I really don't see any reason. We just need to share our experience, to work on it.
So I just want to acknowledge a few things that you've mentioned there. First of all, innovation, invention. I'm going to see it as, I'm going to even acknowledge that with those things that are very much alive in Israel at a high level, Israel has always been seen to be generous with what you discover and what you invent and what you make available. My question to you is going to be, speak to me about the mentality or the thinking of a country being so generous in the face of so much opposition and rejection. So if we looked at the political landscape here, where there is a tension between Israel and political South Africa, and yet there's still this push to generosity and uplifting, to share what you have and to bring people to the level that the Israeli people have got to. Can you just speak to me about the thinking around that? Because it's counterculture and maybe counterintuitive to be so open in places that are not as open to you.
Well, I would say that from our point of view, what is really important is the people. I'm not saying that, political issues are not important. But I think since we see and we encounter, and it's not only my perception, I hear it from very many Israelis that come to South Africa. There is a lot of tourism that was here before COVID, but now hopefully it will resume soon. We already have direct flights. So this is the first step. And I think people will return and they will come here, they will enjoy. There will be a lot of people-to-people connections. Very many South Africans also visit Israel. And now again, also from our side, almost all the restrictions have been lifted, so people can travel to Israel, can see, can find out. And this sort of people-to-people communication, connection, ties, etc., this is an excellent base for building the relations. Once we have that, I'm sure that other things will follow.
Wonderful. That's amazing. I'm going to ask you around the different challenges. So South Africa poses opportunity and challenge. How do the different posts differ? You've spoken about the uniqueness of the South African challenge. Can you give us any insights into your previous posts and how different those experiences were?
Well, each country has its own specifics, let's say, and each country has its own challenges and its own opportunities, obviously. So obviously when you are a diplomat in a foreign country, your job is to try to bring your country together with your hosting country closer together, to maximize the opportunities, not to underestimate the challenges, but try to exploit the opportunities despite the challenges. And again, when I was in Ukraine, both me and my wife, we had excellent time, really. We enjoyed it very much. The people were very warm to us, very friendly, like here. But also there were their own challenges. The country was in a stage of, when we came there, it was just post-revolution. There was, again, war with Russia those days as well. It was not on such a massive scale, but still it was there. So again, its own challenges. When I was in India, again, those of you who had the opportunity to visit it, it's not a simple place. You know, it's not even a country, it's kind of a continent. It's very, very different. And the challenges there are also pretty much economical, because you see the state of the people, and it's not easy even to see it. But nevertheless, as I said earlier, you know, challenges are there. They're always there, and there will always be. But our job is to try to overcome them and see how we can work together. And just one more point, I think, you know, when you meet people in different countries, you see that basically they are very, very similar to each other. You know, people want to develop, they want for their children to live well. It's basically the same everywhere. And when you speak to people on an eye-to-eye level, you know, you can get very easily through, even if they speak another language or they have a different mentality. But by and large, we are all very, very similar.
That's amazing. And that's the insight you have, having been to many countries and lived within cultures. So it's quite incredible. Just changing lanes a little bit, in Israel itself, I think we have a very narrow perspective of the local context. From a religious point of view, what is the religious landscape? Are there many religions that worship in Israel? Is it very much the Jewish people and Palestinians, or Israelis, Palestinians? What is the faith landscape in Israel?
Yeah. Well, in Israel, of course, we have people of different religions. The majority of the people in Israel are Jewish people. It's basically the only country in the world which is a Jewish state. But then we also have a significant minority of about 20% of Arabs, which are predominantly Muslim, but there are also there is also quite a big Christian minority. And then there are some other small groups, like, for example, Druze, which is a kind of a separate religion. Also, we have Baha'i Center and Baha'i people living in Israel as well. So it's pretty diverse. One of the things that are unique to Israel is the fact that Israel, in fact, has 3 family judicial legal systems, which means that the issues within the Christian community or within the Arab Muslim community that are related to family law are judged by their own courts, according to their own tradition. And these courts are funded by the state, which means that a Muslim judge or a Muslim or a Christian judge is equal, basically, in these courts to a state judge in courts. And of course, beyond that, we also have judges, Muslim or Christian judges in regular courts. For example, I think it was about 15 years ago, we had a case against the Israeli president that was sent to jail. And the judge that sentenced him was a Christian judge in a district court. So it's very, very diverse. And yeah, it's, you know, I hope that all our viewers can go to Israel and see it for themselves.
Yes. And talk to me a little bit about Christians in Israel. Obviously 20% of many different religions. What does Christianity look like in Israel? And on the back of that question, what is your view on Christians? And is there any relevance in the importance of relationship with Christians, Jews and Christians?
Well, I think the support of the Christian community in Israel and beyond, also here, is crucial for the success of Israel. This, we can see it, we know it, and this is one of my missions here, one of parts of my mandate, is also to strengthen this link.
Okay.
It's very important. Again, the last years, unfortunately, because of COVID, we didn't have many meetings and many visits and so on. But in normal times, if you go to Jerusalem, or those of you who have been there and seen the streets, the very narrow alleys of the old city, they're full with people. Many of them, very many of them, are pilgrims from all over the world. And of course, in Jerusalem, the most important place, or one of the most important places for Christians, is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And there was always there is a huge queue to enter the church. And during COVID, it was in a way, people who came there were lucky. We also went there a few times, and there was no queues suddenly. So in a way, it was sad. For us, it was good because you could see the church inside without the so many people that visit. But in general, it's a very important part of the Israeli landscape.
Okay.
Very important.
I hope I don't repeat a question that's been asked, but historically, the view of Christianity from a Jewish perspective must have been tainted or soured. If you think back to the world wars and everything that happened in those times, would you say that perspective is being repaired, is already repaired? Can you comment on that?
Well, I'm not a theologist, so you know, from a religious point of view, I'm probably not the right person to comment on that. But I think that if you go to Israel, if you speak to people there, if you meet people, first, it doesn't really matter to them if you're a Christian, you're a Jew, you're a Muslim, you know. I don't think people look at it from that angle, not from a religious angle. I think what happened during the Holocaust was terrible, and unfortunately there were not enough people that helped the Jews in those dark days, for sure. But it was not because they were Christians or because they were of any other religion. That was the situation, and I think nowadays, you know, we don't look at it from any sort of religious perspective. It's more, you know, it's more on a personal level kind of relationship or community level, but not religious. Thank you.
Great. Two difficult topics as we come towards a close. The first being anti-Semitism. It's just something that always seems to rise its head. It kind of becomes quiet, and then you see it elevated again somewhere in the world. We've obviously seen it in South Africa. We've seen it in our city over time, and it's always something that threatens. But globally, would you say that there's been any a forward positive movement against anti-Semitism? I know that the anti-racism campaigns across the world are very much alive, and included in many of those campaigns is a zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. Is that something that Israel see being effective? Is there change coming across the world? Do you think it will ever go away?
Well, it's difficult to say, actually. I would say that anti-Semitism is a problem of the humanity as a whole. It's not a problem of Israel or a problem of the Jewish people. It's a problem of all of us. Exactly like racism or racial discrimination against anybody else. So this is something that unfortunately exists. And I think anti-Semitism in particular is also being fueled in many cases also by hatred towards Israel. And this is something that we unfortunately are experiencing. It's not something that is very unique. And it's actually, as a human being, I can say that it's very sad to see people that are motivated by hatred. You know, and this is very, very challenging, because many of these people, it's not somebody you can talk to and
Yes.
explain to him and try to find a common ground like civilized people do when they have any differences. But when a person is motivated by hatred, it's very difficult to try to explain him or appeal to rationale, etc. So from that angle, I think it's very important to try to prevent these people from dictating policies, you know, because that creates a huge challenge.
I think that's a very significant point, is that at the root of it there's hatred, and there's the lack of rationale or reasonable thinking, which just speaks to the whole mindset and mentality in itself. How can it be right? But thank you for your comments. I think lastly, it would be an amazing opportunity for us to get some insights into Ukraine. I know that we're not going to talk directly to the conflict, but you know, we're obviously praying for something and from a distance, and we know what we know, particularly through media. But you, somebody who's been there, you've lived there, and you have friends there. Can you just give us some general insights when you think the Ukraine? What do you see? What is it like? What are the people like? You've spoken a bit about South Africa. Who are Ukrainians? And then I'm going to ask you after that, how can we pray? We've got a prayer meeting tonight as a church family. We're coming in. We obviously will be praying into that. But it would be great to pray off the back of some local insights around the Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's still very difficult for us really to realize, when you know a city, the cities in Europe, it hasn't experienced any war or anything of a sort for the last 60 years. So it's like 2 generations, or maybe even a 3rd generation, that never experienced anything of a sort. And when you think of the city, which is truly beautiful, I mean, not all the cities in Ukraine are so nice, but Kiev is truly a jewel. And you think of people hiding, people trying to escape, spending hours on the roads with their families, with little children, crying, people who stay because they have nowhere to go. They don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. They don't know if they will have enough food. They don't know if there will be running water. It's something that is very, very difficult to understand. And I have to say also, as an Israeli, because I can't say we are used to wars, because it's not something you can get used to. But we are more or less let's say, we know how to deal with this, okay, to some extent. But we at least know how to deal with this. But when you speak about Ukraine, the people there, it's a tragedy of really unimaginable magnitude, I would say.
A couple of thoughts on how we can pray tonight.
Well, I'm not sure I'm an expert on what is the best way to pray, but I think once you pray from your heart, and it's really genuinely wish people well, I'm sure it's going to help. That's.
Mr. Ambassador, we are incredibly grateful for your time and for your willingness to speak and speak openly and freely. And I just want to reiterate the introduction of today, and that is that our hearts and our posture is open and generous, and we would love to have more opportunity maybe with you in your term in South Africa, and hope to see you again in this place and in other places, as I know we have common friends, and so we just wish you well, and we pray for absolute success and fruitfulness in your time in South Africa. And if we can do anything to help and support what you are doing, then we are available to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I wish you all that we will have a good future in front of us. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. We hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you all soon.